So to me, decentralization is, first of all, it's not a goal in itself.
Right.
And secondly, it's a security property, and I will explain what I mean by that. At the end of the day, the reason we believe that decentralization is a good feature of a system, or a good thing to strive for, is because we want the good things that it offers. Walrus is really good for transitioning away from a model where I, as an application developer, just owns all the data, collects it, manages it, and that's it. That's where Walrus really shines.
We built Walrus, we've built Quilt, we've built Seal, we've built Nautilus. Like we've delivered a lot over the last sort of 6 months or so. Like we're not mucking around here. We're committed. Hello, George.
Hello, Rebecca.
Nice. It's always so lovely to see you. I thought we would talk a little bit about Walrus today.
Sure.
So obviously you were sort of the visionary of Walrus. Would that be fair to say?
Well, not exactly. So when we started Mysten Labs and we went around talking to people about how we're going to build a kind of new blockchain ecosystem, one of the things we were telling people at the time was that we found the idea that you can't store a lot of data on the blockchain really limiting. And what we really meant is, the limits of ecosystems like EVM, etc., where you can really only store a few bytes at a time. What people actually heard is that they would like to store a lot of data, like megabytes, images, videos, machine learning models, etc., which is not really what we thought we were saying. So the concept that we eventually would need, and there was a demand for, the ability to store in a decentralized way, more data than just what you can store on a kind of like high performance, but still a blockchain, started there. And then as we were building the kind of Sui ecosystem and Sui got to a certain place, it became apparent that applications will need more data. And this is really how Walrus came to be as a concept.
So then, like, as maybe like a blockchain history question, that when you say that to me now, that sounds obvious. Like if we really had all of these beautiful visions for blockchain and Web3, we were always going to need somewhere to store big files. Had it been a discussion like
Right.
for the last 10 years or?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? And modern blockchains do store a lot of data. For example, they do store blockchain history, but they do so in a kind of awkward way. In theory, everybody should be storing that mass of data, which is a blockchain history. In practice, it's very expensive for hundreds or thousands of replicas out there, miners, validators to all store it. So eventually, particularly high throughput blockchains that generate a lot of data history end up kind of storing it in a few places, sometimes in cloud, sometimes on-premise in a few parties, etc. So it's a need that is kind of like underserved, I would say, when it comes to blockchain history. When it comes to other kinds of data, I think that most blockchain ecosystems really didn't get to the point of needing, for example, their front ends to be also decentralized like we do on Walrus, or particular media associated with NFTs to be decentralized in their storage, etc. So I think a lot of ecosystems just hadn't got to a point of performance of the main blockchain to really enable applications that need that day to day.
And I guess they were storing on Amazon.
IPFS as well. There are some decentralized storage solutions out there, and we can talk about them. So somewhat the needs seem to have been met, but we thought this was not quite enough for what we wanted.
Since I have been involved in this ecosystem, I really got to see firsthand the 5 founders of Mysten and how they've got this very mission-driven approach to rebuilding the tech stack. Like, we're not mucking around here. We're committed. So you saying that about building storage in Walrus does make perfect sense. And I can completely understand why this group of people felt that it was necessary. It might even been a little bit too early. Would that be fair to say? But because that group is actually always pushing forward and wanting to move the whole industry and ecosystem forward, that they jumped in and built it? Or would that be wrong to say?
I think it would be fair to say that we are early in terms of the overall journey, but I think that we are at the point where we're really laying the foundation. That's how I think about it. And that is early for some things and the right time for others. So what I mean by that is, it is clear that the foundation of a decentralized ecosystem is a ledger. The Sui stack is that ledger. It is also clear that a ledger is not enough to build full decentralized applications. We went for storage through thinking about Walrus and launching Walrus Next. But other components as well are now coming live in that Walrus is also leveraging. We have components that do trusted execution. We have components that do encryption. And now that is all part of the Sui Walrus stack. And it is true that it is early in the sense that these are foundational components. They offer very basic functionalities to store data, to retrieve data, to check that it's there, to get keys, to give access control to keys. These are a little bit like raw ingredients. You start cooking, right? And you have the raw ingredients. You're not quite there at the gourmet meal, right? But without the raw ingredients, you also can't do it, right? We are early that we shouldn't already have gathered the ingredients because the journey might take us years to get like to a fully usable, pleasure to use decentralized stack that you can just, without thinking about it, build your decentralized applications. But the journey has to start from this foundation.
Okay, I've never heard you use that, and I don't know how good a cook you are, but I think you nailed it. I like that. I like it quite a lot.
I am a good cook. This is the problem. You can tell.
I think I had a cake you made once, but okay, hang on. So I got another question there. I want to drill in a little bit about decentralization because I know I'm not supposed to say this, but a lot of people talk about decentralization. They say it's really important. Often we find when we're talking to potential builders and partners, actually decentralization isn't their number one priority. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Because we've built this high-performant decentralized thing, but actually if people don't care about decentralization, what was the point?
Yeah. So to me, decentralization is, first of all, it's not a goal in itself.
Right.
And secondly, it's a security property, and I will explain what I mean by that. So decentralization is not a goal in itself, means that at the end of the day, the reason we believe that decentralization is a good feature of a system or a good thing to strive for, we want the good things that it offers, right? And what are these good things? These good things are freedom from being locked in on one provider, and that provider somehow having then an influence on your product or on how much your product will cost, or then when that provider goes down and is unreliable, you lose basically the ability to serve your customers, right?
And I think it's right. I've heard stories that, especially with a lot of centralized data storage, like pure data storage, it's actually very expensive to get your data out. And that seems to be a big barrier to people.
Because, of course, the business model of all providers is to give you enough incentives to onboard with them and then lock you in, right? And then somehow drive you into giving them more and more value at the end of the day. So decentralization mitigates the effects of that, right? By allowing you to build on an infrastructure that is by construction neutral. If a particular provider wants to change their business model, well, the whole infrastructure still operates at a price point and at a level of reliability that you expect, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that through decentralization, you can have truly autonomous applications, right? I mean, an application that runs as a smart contract on the Sui platform and then as a front end on Walrus doesn't depend on centralized points of failure that might come under pressure to, again, either take your application down or, kind of capture your value or anything like that. So, decentralization is not like something you should strive to automatically maximize. It's not something that, you should aim to have an infinity of. As a developer, you should try to think, okay, what are the kind of pressures that my product may come under from centralization, from being over-reliant on one jurisdiction. And you should strive to have enough decentralization to free yourself from quite a few of these pressures. And as long as you have enough for your product, right, that's good enough for you. And now that's what I mean when I say decentralization is a security property, namely how much you need really depends on what kind of threats you may come under, right? If you run a monetary system, you may actually need a lot of it, right? Because there are very motivated adversaries out there that will try to disrupt it, that will try to corrupt it, that will try to do all sorts of things. If you're running a company that sells teddy bears, you may care about your service not going down and losing sales, but again, this may not be at the level of assurance that having a monetary system or an auction system for stable coins requires, right? So the aim I think we should have is to allow people to onboard at the level that they need and paying, of course, the kind of like maybe performance or cost price, depending on that.
I think that's a really useful distinction because I think you hear too often in this space that decentralization is sort of a goal in its own. And I think bringing this nuance to it makes it a lot easier for everyday people to understand, like evaluating risk and then matching that risk with security makes sense. So I like that quite.
And it's also the design philosophy. Every time I think how to design systems, what I'm thinking is not let's pick a degree of decentralization and force everybody there. What I'm thinking is let's actually pick architectures that then allow developers to pick their own degree of decentralization. Like I always like to offer folks a backstop that is, massively decentralized, right? Hundreds of entities around the world, all replicating things, pretty much impossible to censor or disrupt. But then I also like people, for example, in the case of Walrus, who really have Web 2 latency needs to use modern caches, right, in order to be able to distribute the material in the good case where, it's not actually under suppression or being disrupted.
So if you are an entrepreneur or a developer and you're looking for that storage layer, what's the decision tree that you would go down if you were evaluating and getting to a Walrus solution?
I think that the first thing I would consider is what are my needs for robustness? What are my needs for censorship resistance? What are my needs when it comes to actually building into my application functions that give end users or partners more ownership or control over their data? I think that's the kind of foundation here. Walrus is really good for transitioning away from a model where I, as an application developer, just owns all the data, collects it, manages it, and that's it. No one else can do anything with it, to a model where this ownership is really shared with other stakeholders.
Okay.
They either basically can co-share data, give access to the data, maybe take the data and use it in other contexts, etc. Right? Like when basically it comes to sharing data with other people in a way that both parties have control, both I as a developer and they also have control, that's where Walrus really shines.
So if you're the entrepreneur, how are you making money off that? All of this sharing and data ownership, like we know that Facebook makes money off data. If you own your data, how am I going to make any money by using Walrus?
I think there are many models, right? I mean, Walrus, of course, supports conditional access to data. So you can encrypt your data, have subscription, sell subscription, get the data. Walrus also can be used as a data store for the parts of your data that are not really the money generation. Like a social network is a good example, right? I mean, social networks don't make money out of like serving data or hiding data. They make money out of advertising. And the same model is, of course, available to folks who use Walrus as a data store.
We built it. We built Walrus. We've built Quilt. We've built Seal. We've built Nautilus. Like we've delivered a lot over the last sort of 6 months or so. What happens now?
So as I mentioned earlier, we have done a lot of the foundational work to build pieces, right? I mean, Walrus as the data store, Seal as a key management solution that is programmable to interface with trusted execution environments. But now is the time where we really provide high-level abstractions to make it easy for developers to use them all together, right? I would like, ideally speaking, for a developer to be able to build a pipeline that, let's say, store some data on Walrus, encrypted and with access control to some parties, not others. Then a T being able to take that data, do some processing, attest that the processing is right, encrypt it, store it again on Walrus, make it accessible to whoever has subscribed, for example. I would like that kind of pipeline to be as straightforward to build as a web app today. We're not quite there yet, but now we're building higher and higher level abstractions to allow for that.
And is that something that we are building? But I presume the community can go out and build those things themselves, add it to the code base.
So increasingly, what Mysten team is building is exactly what the community can also be building. Like at this point of the project of Walrus, on behalf of the Walrus Foundation, we're hardly actually changing the storage node, which is the heart of the network. We're largely building smart contracts on top of a suite that manage Walrus in particular ways to make it easier. We are building connectors to make it easy to use Walrus with access control or with trusted execution, etc.
What is the hard bit to what we sent here. You talk to me, it sounds really easy. Is there a specifically hard bit about this challenge, or is it just it has to be done? It's operation. Someone's got to build it, and we're building it.
You're asking what the hard bit of this decentralization stack, Walrus maybe specifically, is. I think at the end of the day, it is the business aspect, right? I mean, in terms of technology, maybe 15 years ago, there were some open problems about how can one build decentralized equivalents for the basic infrastructures we have in Web 2. I think a lot of these challenges have been overcome, or we're very close to overcoming them. Like, it's pretty clear how to scale up decentralized technologies, how to combine them, how to pay for them, etc. So now we're reaching the point where the challenge is really to understand which particular markets decentralization provides value first, use these markets in order to mature these stacks effectively. And as the stacks mature, everything becomes cheaper and simpler, and that expands effectively the markets to other things that need decentralization, but maybe not as early adopters, right?
I think that's heat and amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.